Here we are with another episode of Competitive Edge here for the Esportsbet YouTube channel. We are going to be discussing the semifinals of the League of Legends World Championship, looking at some potentially like handicaps and prop bets as well over the course of this series to flesh it out a little bit more. As usual, guys, if you have signed up with Esportsbet using our referral code, that's just dandy. If you go ahead and place your bet on our match of the week, which obviously is going to be JDG versus T1. There's a couple ways you could enter on the match of the week. One of them is to actually just drop your username from Esportsbet in a comment below, and that will enter you to win a raffle of up to $20 USDT. Another way to enter that raffle is to place a $10 or more bet on our match of the week. And that means that if you win the raffle, the money gets doubled as well. So two ways to enter, one of which will gain you more money if you win the raffle, and that's by putting the $10 or more bet down. But you can also enter for free. There's tons of ways to play along for free as well. Of course, the esports coins are a way to have fun without spending money. And also, you can transfer them into cryptocurrencies if you acquire enough. And you can get those for free by following Esportsbet on Twitter, Instagram, and joining their Discord. You do that, you get up to 20,000 esports coins. Just go ahead and message the mods in their Discord or the chat on the website, and they will go ahead and add those to your account. And if you're signing up for the first time, get that 50% deposit bonus using our link, up to $100 USDT. So many ways to play along, and still some good value to get here through the rest of the World Championship. Let's start off with BLG Weibo, Thorin. Do you think there's any chance that Weibo can take this series?
The thing is, being as their odds are over 3, I don't think it's totally inconceivable it can happen. The problem is this: it's just really hard to figure out how they would do it. Like if I had to list the win conditions, it's tricky to come up with what they would be. But I essentially just think BLG has just played a little bit sort of touch and go in the tournament. So I think it's more that I just don't think they will be as dominant necessarily. But I do favour BLG to win. They are a better team fundamentally as a squad. A bunch of their players just consistently play better. Whereas like the problem with Weibo is, I mean, for me, the game that really defined them was the loss to G2. It's like that shouldn't even be possible to lose in that scenario. I don't think any other top Asian team could have lost that, because everyone wanted to give the props to G2 for how they fought back. It's like that wouldn't have mattered. Like if that had been JDG or even LNG, they would have just won the game. They would have, you know. So Weibo is the only one that can give you that way back in, I think, you know.
KT did manage to lose game 4 against JDG, but JDG is also a much better team, and it required some mega plays by Ruler and Knight, right? I wouldn't say that G2 had some mega plays to get themselves back into that game, not at the same level as what we saw from Ruler in that game number 4 versus KT. So I'm tempted to agree with you. Before we dive deeper, I think we should probably review our wagers from last week, just because they were all quite good. As you guys will remember, or maybe you don't if you didn't watch it, we actually did put down, we took some flyers because basically the BLG Energy and KT flyers were all close to or above 4.0. Now we hit on the BLG one, which basically more than covered the Energy and KT flyers. And then I put the wager down on T1 with 200 USDT at 1.7 odds. So we actually came out like really, really far ahead this past week. We did quite well. But that's the power of, we did say that we thought there would probably be like one upset in the quarterfinals. So if you put the smaller amounts on the flyers, sometimes you can get some good value. So been doing pretty well overall.
By the way, let's be real. There's a world where it could have been, look, the joke is in the end, it couldn't have been the NRG one. All the other ones could have been the upset. The BLG one did happen. The KT one looked like it was possible. And then LNG just played so impossibly bad. It wasn't a game, was it? So it could have been 3 upsets for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there were moments that perhaps you thought it was possible, and it was just really the odds of all being around 4 or more that made it so tasty. Now this one at only 3.5, it does feel like if this one was at 4.5, I might take the flyer here, but BLG has just been very consistent at beating most of the non-elite teams, and I don't think Weibo really falls into this camp. And while it's true that Weibo has played up to their opponents, they famously have beaten JDG in the regular season of LPL. which is not true of BLG during the summer at the very least. The BLG roster just feels like they're more dialed into the meta right now. We saw some really big shifts in the way they were willing to play the game, and they actually went towards picks that they had historically never really played. Like Jun really didn't play Jarvan. Bin had never played a game of Rumble before. And not only did they go into these picks, they looked good on these picks, right? They looked good.
Jun was just the best player in that series, mate. He looked really good. Better man, that's Gen G they were playing. That was legit, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that perhaps earlier in the tournament, you know, as they tried things like Jun's Pocket in Italy, they were a little bit more uncomfortable. But if I'm BLG and I just played a bunch of champions that I had never played before, not only individually, but obviously as a team as well, and I just beat Gen G, I'm going to be pretty fucking confident in my abilities. And I think that that confidence is going to carry over. They're more likely to kind of play into the power picks of the draft, even if they have been uncomfortable, because they're going to have the faith that they can pull through against good teams. And Weibo has certainly not been the best performer. So for me, this is more about seeing if we can find an angle that makes sense to place a more impactful wager onto BLG. And I think Dom really nailed this when we were doing Power Spike, which is like you start looking at BLG minus 1.5, which is like 1.9 odds, which feels a lot better, which means that you think they're either going to win 3-1 or 3-0 over the course of this series. And yeah, I don't know. I think that winning that matchup at minus 1.5 makes it a little bit more palatable to like pick the favorite.
Because the other problem I have with the idea we're going to like craft a Weibo underdog narrative is actually at this tournament, the Shy has actually sort of like looked way better than he has in China. Like he hasn't looked as inty, but at the same time, like Bin is arguably the best player in the tournament right now. Like he's just fucking smurfing on everyone in it. So I don't even think that's actually viable. Like maybe you can get one game, like you say, but like I don't think that even if this is close, it's still surely 3 games to 1. It's not a 3-2 series. It doesn't feel like.
Yeah, it's either 3-0 or 3-1 for BLG. That's why the minus 1.5 I think makes a lot of sense, especially when we get at 1.9, which will almost double our money, right? So be 381 back on a 200 bet, and I think that's kind of where we go with this one. Now the outright odds are much more interesting on JDG versus T1, clearly. Now we had a little debate on Summoning Insight. I'm taking T1 because it's one of the rare times that they're actually not underdogs, which they, you know, or they're not favorites rather, where they actually are the underdogs. So the T1 fans haven't really gotten to this line yet, or perhaps they've pushed it just about as far as it could go. I think T1 in this meta, even though LNG did roll over and die, and it's not really an indication of how well JDG will perform against T1, I think T1 is really dialed into this meta right now. I love the fact that they have such an enormous diversity of champions in the bot lane. You know, we haven't even seen the Caitlyn yet come out of that bot lane, which we know is going to be a constant threat. We know that Owner, when he gets the Jarvan, when he gets the Lee Sin, can be an absolute menace. He had a really good Poppy game in this series as well, which hails back to kind of a couple of years ago when he was the big Poppy player instead of Peanut, like Peanut is now, or has been more recently, I should say. It just feels like everything is going T1's direction. Faker has enough kind of stable control mage champions to play that even in his potentially still injured, partially injured condition, he can pull it off. Like, I don't know if we're going to see any assassins like Akali out of him. He's been playing them in solo queue, but if there was going to be an upset, it feels like the very high tempo, punishing early game of T1 can deal with a JDG that frankly started out very slow against KT and was pretty weak in the early game, kind of making it back in the mid and late game.
The problem, like, obviously, this is one where we'll go on opposite sides. I'll take JDG because I'll put it like this. For the tournament favorite to have a best of 5 where they're over 1.6 odds, you can't ask for better than that. Like, this might end up being the greatest team to play League of Legends. You're going to get a 1.6 odds in a best of 5. Like, that's amazing. I've got to take that. And so for me, the main angle is this. I just don't believe, fucking hell with that. I just don't believe that they can pull it off T1. Like maybe they can win a game. That's all I'll give them though. Because I also think another factor as well is this. It's how the game ends. Like in your world, they have to accelerate and they do it flawlessly almost and always remain in control. Like I'll tell you an angle right now. Everyone knows that stacks. It was all over Reddit that when BLG gets, when JDG gets the Baron, they just end the game within 3 minutes. Like it's just over at that point. Like that's the win condition. Well, I'll tell you what, here's the difference. Unlike the LNG series, JDG aren't just going to give up infinite dragons and barons and go, oh, well, back out. Like, they're just going to go for them. In fact, it's one of the things I think is so addictive about watching this team play is they clearly are taking fights that on paper, if you just analyze the champions, you're at a disadvantage, but they make it, it's like, that is their style. Their style, essentially, if you want to use like an MMA analogy, they're the people who like choose to fight in the pocket, like in a scenario that, you know, against the ropes, but they're just amazing at doing it and they knock you out every time they do it. So my problem is essentially for me, T1 has to walk a tightrope and never fall. If they fall, they're going to get caught. Because I tell you what, this team, like to close the game, this team is unbelievable. The JDG squad, they close so fast with an advantage, and then when you have the advantage, you can just seemingly never get it over the line. So until I've seen them lose, I'm not betting against them, mate.
I think though that this T1 roster does actually have the pace and the tempo to get advantages, particularly around the lethality power spikes that we saw during the series that they played against LNG, to get enough of a lead to get that first Baron that I don't know if JDG is going to have the same opportunities. I think they're going to be playing on a back foot, unlike at any other point so far in this iteration of the team. Right? There's going to be very little margin for error in their early game, and they're really going to have to bring it. And I just don't think they have the same diversity of champ pool in the bot lane and like weird strategies that we've seen from T1 so far. T1 really just feels like they're in their comfort zone. So I know in Summoning Insight, you're taking JDG. I'm gonna take T1 here for the purpose of the show, but we are actually on opposite sides of this one. I think there's other angles that you can look at though. You know, one thing I'm gonna take T1 at 200, but I think that one thing when it comes to prop bets, now famously T1 did get every single Drake within the context of the series that they played against LNG. And they do actually have pretty good odds. Like they are the favorites to get first dragon, because remember, it's the way that these things were happening. They were often giving up first blood in order to achieve a cross map Drake. So it was, you know, Faker or Zeus dying in a first blood gank, but the spending of resources, whether it was like HP as a resource, so then you have to recall, which then gives owner, you know, the priority to take a 5 or 6 minute Drake. And I think this is really going to be a core of their strategy. Their bot lane may not be as punishing in game one because JDG actually has selected red side first, which means that the R5 support counterpick or some of their kind of more strange tricks that they were pulling within these drafts may not be quite as effective. But I see T1 as a team that is just going to really focus on this early Drake. So even getting at 1.753 for first Drake feels pretty good. So we'll put 100 on that one. And conversely, too, the first blood thing, I think T1 doesn't actually mind giving up first blood because I think that they realize that that dedication of resources accelerates their soul. So I'll put 50 on first blood for JDG at 1.779. I think these are some interesting prop bets. You know, sometimes you kind of want to wait to see how the team comps develop. And remember that you can place a lot of these bets live as well before you make some of these calls. And certainly I have benefited from that while I've watched the matches and seen like how the games are playing out, because sometimes like a team, you know, you'll be in an even gold state, but one team will have significantly better scaling. And that's where you're in the live odds and you see you can actually get a pretty good return just based on your knowledge of how team compositions should interact or how well they will grow into the late game. I also want to ask you, what do you think about outright odds? Because we still have some of these for the World Championship finals right now. So I will read some to you. Right now, you know, we have outright odds that are 1.923 for JDG. So only slightly higher than them actually beating T1, which I find to be interesting. Let me pull this over here for you guys. We're not actually seeing it right now on the screen. And then we also have 2.439 for T1, 3.333 for Billy, and 4 for Weibo, which seems low. So would you take JDG at 1-9 just to win the tournament outright at this point in time?
The thing is, since there's only 2 matches, I think that's pretty good for a team that I think is the favourite. If you're not doing that, I actually think the only other team priced in is Billy. Like the 3.33 for them is not too bad. If you think, like, for example, in a world where
good, right?
team 1 wins and maybe they can do the upset, I think it's plausible.
All right, well, we're gonna do it on Billy just because those odds seem interesting, and because they're almost certainly going to go to the finals. And if they can pull off a clean win versus Weibo, it's not like this team lacks the talent to win Worlds. There was a reason they had the best domestic regular season record in LPL history in a season where LPL was ludicrously stacked with talent, like ludicrously stacked. This is certainly one of, if not the most competitive split in LPL history. And Billy beat everybody in the regular season except for JDG. So even though you might look at it and say, well, T1 kind of slapped them, I think they bounced back and learned a lot from that series. So we will put a small one here. We'll put a cheeky 50 onto Billy at 3.33. I agree that one seems like kind of the best value out of the options that we have. All right, guys, that's going to do it for Competitive Edge for this week. We'll be back with a variety of different styles of bets that you might consider for the finals as we talk through that inevitable matchup, including more of these prop bets, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, you know what, Thorin? I'm going to do one more. I'm going to see what kind of odds we can get by betting on Billy and...
I'll put it together.
T1. Just to double down a little bit for fun. We'll put a small one down. Because we get 2.795 odds for that.
Okay.
And that seems like something fun to put a 50 on.
I mean, luckily the BLG side obviously feels pretty secure. So you're essentially just doubling up your bet from J1 winning against JDG, right?
Yeah. So we'll do a fun little parlay bet there as well. Lots of different ways to compete, obviously, over on Esportsbet. Remember to sign up with our link below. And, of course, leave your comment with your username below so that you can be entered to that raffle to win up to 20 USDT into your Esportsbet account. So you actually can place a little bit more money onto the semifinals and finals of Worlds. With that, guys, we'll be back for the finals next week. We'll see you then.